president within 40 years.
Robert Kennedy, when he was Attorney General, said that he could imagine the possibility of a Negro president in the United States within perhaps 40 years. Do you think this is at all realistic?
Well, let me say first that I think it is necessary to make it clear that there are Negroes who are presently qualified to be president of the United States. There are many who are qualified in terms of integrity, in terms of vision, in terms of leadership ability. But we do know that there are certain problems and prejudices and mores in our society which make it difficult now. However, I am very optimistic about the future. Frankly, I have seen certain changes in the United States over the last 2 years that surprised me. I've seen levels of compliance with the Civil Rights Bill and changes that have been most surprising. So on the basis of this, I think we may be able to get a Negro president in less than 40 years. I would think that this could come in 25 years or less.
That's the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King speaking on BBC in 1964. Bob Moses is one of the leading civil rights icons from the 1960s. He was the former field secretary for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC. The New York Times once wrote, "In Mississippi, Bob Moses was the equivalent of Martin Luther King." Moses is also the founder of the Algebra Project, a foundation devoted to improving minority education and math. He joins us from a studio in Boston. I'm also joined here in Washington, D.C. for our special guest. Alice Walker will be joining us for our entire live coverage of the inauguration, co-hosting with me. Alice Walker, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author, poet, and activist. In 1983, she won the Pulitzer Prize for her book, The Color Purple. She's written many other best-selling books, including In Search of Our Mother's Gardens and Possessing the Secret of Joy. Her most recent book is We Are the Ones We Have Been Waiting For, Inner Light in a Time of Darkness. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! It is an honor, Alice Walker, to co-host with you today. Today's live inauguration coverage. Democracy Now! Will be here for 5 hours, just next to the Capitol. You are here in Washington, D.C. Why don't we begin with your feelings today?
Amy, I'm so incredibly happy to be here with you. I have such respect for Democracy Now! And everything that I've been hearing from the concert moved me deeply. I'm feeling wonderful. I feel very happy. I feel that we have a chance now as a country to take our rightful place in the leadership of the world and in the caring of the world.
Bob Moses, as you join us from Boston, your thoughts. Did you ever think you would see this day?
So, not actually. I didn't share King's optimism. And, you know, I was listening to the question because the person from BBC said when Bobby Kennedy was Attorney General. So he must have been talking to King after Bobby Kennedy left the Attorney Generalship. So it sounds to me like it was a little later than 1964. But I didn't share King's optimism. And actually, when I think about this, in order to become President of the United States, you have to be nominated by one of the two political parties. So the crucial thing for me was, in reflecting back, was the 1964 challenge of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to the National Democratic Convention, because that was where the stage was set that allowed this to happen, because without opening up the national political structure in the country, this wasn't going to happen. And, you know, we could have gotten the right to vote without the opening up of the national political party structure. And the party structure wasn't opened up by getting the right to vote. The party structure was opened up by directly challenging in Mississippi the right of Mississippi to send an all-white delegation to the 1964 National Democrat Convention. And it was Fannie Lou Hamer and all the people in that delegation that really forced the National Democratic Party to open up, you know.
Explain exactly what happened, Bob Moses. It was Atlantic City. It was 1964. Explain the moment when Fannie Lou Hamer came to the floor of the convention and...
Well, you know, I was sitting behind the credentials committee, behind in all the floodlights and everything. So all I heard and all I saw was Fannie Lou Hamer giving her testimony. I had no idea that while she was giving her testimony that the president, Lyndon Johnson, was so afraid of this woman who had been raised and lived her life as a sharecropper and had been working on the Marlowe plantation in Sunflower County outside of Ruleville. He was so afraid of her that he went, you know, at that time we just had the three networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and he went to notified all three networks that he had a special announcement because he was terrified that her testimony was so powerful and she was so authentic that people would flood the convention, the Credentials Committee, with telegrams demanding that her party be seated. And so he went and interrupted her testimony. But then the networks decided that this was really an authentic moment, and they replayed what she said that night. And they did flood the Credentials Committee. And so I think it was David Lawrence, who was governor of Pennsylvania, who was the chair of the Credentials Committee. And so he then postponed the decision, and they went after the delegates on the Credentials Committee. Johnson went after them because the issue was whether there would be 11 delegates on the Credentials Committee who would vote to support the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and thus enable a floor discussion. In other words, that the issue, we're talking about democracy, right? So the question is, are we going to be able to get a full discussion and debate by the whole convention around this really critical issue? And of course, Johnson didn't want that. He did not want this to go to the floor, because once it went to the floor and everybody had to get up in public and state their views, then the Democratic Party would have had to seat the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And of course, what Johnson was afraid of was that the whole South would then walk out of the Democratic Party. So this was really high drama. And it was that. I mean, Barack Obama could not be running for president if he had not been able to secure a party to run for. And the Democratic Party, from the time of after the Civil War right until 1964, there were no black delegates to the Democratic Party from the South. And it was that action, more than anything else, which opened up the national party structure and allowed eventually what is happening today to happen.
Alice Walker, can you talk about your trajectory, how you got involved in the civil rights movement? Where were you born?
I was born in Eatonton, Georgia, actually on the remains of a plantation. And my family were sharecroppers. So I could easily see from their experience of not being able to vote, although my father voted in the 30s and had to face down 3 white men holding shotguns. I could see that we lived under, and feel every day that we lived under a very difficult situation. So as soon as I left home to go to school to Spelman College in Atlanta, I joined the student movement, and I was very much influenced by the people in SNCC, and especially by Bob Moses, whom I didn't meet for another 2 or 3 decades. But he was legendary, and he left such a wonderful sense of how one could serve the community. So I went on to school, and my dream was to be able to help the people who were like my own parents and like my grandparents. And so in the summers, I went to register voters in little towns in Georgia, and then later I lived in Mississippi doing the same work for about 7 years. So it was because I truly, deeply appreciated my own people and my own culture, and my parents and grandparents above all, and I saw how hard they worked and how little they received in return of money or kindness. And I wanted very much to change the South for them.
You first